Welcome to Rapid Report, your trusted source for clear, timely, and in-depth global news analysis. Today's report takes us to the heart of international power and perception, where political messaging meets economic reality. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, a stage traditionally reserved for strategic dialogue and global coordination, a highly anticipated appearance by former U.S. President Donald Trump has sparked intense debate across diplomatic, financial, and media circles. As world leaders, investors, and institutions watched in real time, a series of unexpected developments unfolded, raising serious questions about credibility, leadership, and the limits of political rhetoric in a world driven by data, markets, and institutions. In this rapid report, we examine how global reactions challenged long-standing political narratives, why financial markets became central players in the story, and what this moment may signal for the future of international leadership. This is not about political sides. This is about power, perception, and consequences on the world stage. Stay with us as we break it all down, clearly, calmly, and responsibly. For years, Donald Trump's political power rested on a singular and highly effective strategy, shaping reality through rhetoric. By repeating bold claims, rejecting inconvenient facts, and projecting absolute confidence, Trump constructed a parallel narrative universe, one in which perception often mattered more than proof. This approach allowed him to survive scandals, legal challenges, diplomatic ruptures, and economic criticism that might have ended other political careers. However, according to a widely circulated video analysis, Trump's appearance at the World Economic Forum, WEF, in Davos marks a decisive turning point. The video argues that this moment represents the first time Trump's rhetorical dominance publicly collapsed, not because of political opposition, but because undeniable economic, diplomatic, and legal realities asserted themselves in real time. What unfolded, the video claims, was not a single failure, but a simultaneous global unraveling, visible to world leaders, markets, institutions, and the public all at once. Davos, the ultimate test of global credibility. Davos is not merely a conference. It is a symbolic arena of global legitimacy. Leaders who speak there are not addressing voters or supporters, but central bankers, heads of state, institutional investors, and policymakers who rely on data, treaties, and enforceable commitments. Trump arrived at Davos determined to project strength, dominance, and economic triumph. His keynote speech, as framed by the video, was designed to reinforce the image of an America firmly in control of global affairs under his leadership. Yet, according to the narrative presented, multiple crises erupted at the exact moment he attempted to assert that control, creating a dramatic contrast between words and reality. The simulation breaks when reality pushes back. The video's narrator uses a striking metaphor. Trump's presidency functioned like a simulation, sustained by repetition, confidence, and the suppression of contradiction. At Davos, that simulation allegedly broke. This was not due to a single error, but because measurable, observable events contradicted Trump's claims in real time, leaving no space for reinterpretation or spin. The Greenland claim and a diplomatic revolt. One of the most dramatic moments described occurs when Trump reportedly declared that the United States had secured the Arctic through a Greenland deal. According to the video, this statement was immediately recognized by European leaders as false or misleading. The response was swift and symbolic. Denmark's prime minister allegedly stood up, exited the hall in protest, and was followed by other European Union leaders in what appeared to be a coordinated diplomatic walkout. The video frames this as a rare and public act of diplomatic rejection, signaling that Trump's narrative authority no longer commanded automatic deference among traditional allies. Japan's bond market collapses mid-speech. As Trump continued to praise economic strength and global stability, The video claims that a breaking financial alert appeared on screens in Davos. Japan's bond market was entering crisis, according to the narration. The Bank of Japan was losing control of its yield curve policy. Bond yields spiked. Markets reacted instantly. Japan's bond market is widely regarded as a cornerstone of global financial stability. The timing, occurring during Trump's assertions of economic success, created what the video describes as a moment of collective realization. Rhetoric could not override market data. The narrator argues this exposed Trump's limited grasp of interconnected global finance, particularly the reliance of U.S. debt markets on foreign buyers like Japan. They took the building. Law interrupts the spectacle. Perhaps the most striking moment described is a hot microphone incident. An aide allegedly whispered to Trump that New York authorities had served asset seizure notices at Trump Tower as part of ongoing legal proceedings. Trump's reported response, "They took the building," is portrayed as a moment of genuine confusion and shock. The video emphasizes the symbolism. Trump's legal vulnerabilities were no longer abstract. Financial consequences were no longer hypothetical. And enforcement was happening in real time. The clip reportedly went viral worldwide, reinforcing the perception that Trump's personal and political power were colliding with institutional authority. Canada strikes back. Another front opened during the same moment. Following Trump's verbal attacks on Canadian leadership, the video claims that Canada invoked emergency trade measures, blocking shipments of strategic resources, including uranium, potash, heavy crude oil. The narrator frames this as a deliberate and humiliating counterpunch, signaling that even close allies were no longer willing to absorb rhetorical attacks without concrete retaliation. The question Trump could not answer, the turning point of the Davos appearance, according to the video, comes when the WEF moderator poses a technical but unavoidable question. How will the United States finance its growing deficit if Japan stops purchasing U.S. debt? The video claims Trump failed to provide a coherent answer. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, and the audience collectively recognized that Trump was outmatched by the economic reality of the moment. This exchange is portrayed as the collapse of Trump's central illusion, that confidence alone could substitute for policy depth. Real-time fact-checking and the end of the post-truth era. The analysis goes further, suggesting that Davos symbolized the end of the post-truth political era, at least at the highest levels of global governance. At Davos, markets contradicted claims instantly. Social media amplified discrepancies in seconds. Live data removed the delay that once allowed narratives to settle. Truth, the narrator argues, became simultaneous, not negotiable. Turmoil inside the White House. Behind the scenes, the video describes a White House in disarray. Aides panicking, blame shifting internally, firings anticipated, and a president retreating to monitor viral clips of his own humiliation. Whether exaggerated or not, the portrayal reinforces the central thesis. Trump's aura of invincibility was visibly shaken. The collapse of an aura. The video does not claim that Donald Trump's political career ends at Davos. Instead, it frames the moment as symbolic and irreversible. His economic narrative fractured. His diplomatic standing eroded. His financial vulnerabilities became public, and global leaders began acting as if he were no longer the central axis of power. More than a failed speech, Davos is presented as the moment when language reached its limit, and reality, economic, legal, and diplomatic, asserted itself in full view of the world. Beyond the spectacle, what Davos really exposed. What makes the Davos moment significant is not embarrassment, optics, or viral clips. It is that three systems Trump long relied on, finance, alliances, and institutions, signaled their independence at the same time. For the first time, Trump was not facing critics, but autonomous systems that do not negotiate with rhetoric. This is the core rupture the video highlights. Trump's power functioned in human systems, media cycles, political polarization, loyal bases, but failed against systemic ones. The structural limits of rhetorical power. Trump's political method was never built on consensus or institutional trust. It relied on narrative dominance, personal branding, confrontation as leverage, and uncertainty as a negotiating tool. This worked domestically, where polarization allowed competing realities to coexist. On the global stage, however, systems operate on enforcement, credibility, and predictability. At Davos, Trump was no longer speaking to voters or supporters. He was confronting bond markets that price risk, governments that enforce treaties, courts that execute judgments, and allies who calculate costs, not loyalty. Rhetoric could not override any of these. Finance, where confidence is not belief, but math. The Japanese bond shock is central to the deeper argument. The video implies something more troubling than a market fluctuation: the fragility of the post-war financial architecture. For decades, Japan absorbed U.S. debt, suppressed yields, and stabilized global liquidity. Trump's inability to answer how the U.S. would finance its deficit without Japanese participation revealed a dependency he had long denied. This was not merely a technical failure, it was a philosophical one. The Davos audience, according to the analysis, realized that U.S. fiscal dominance depends on cooperation, not coercion. Financial power cannot be commanded, only maintained. And confidence evaporates when leadership appears improvisational. This moment suggested not just Trump's weakness, but America's exposure. Diplomacy, from hegemony to conditional partnership. The European walkout over Greenland is framed as more than insult. It is a signal of transition. For decades, U.S. leadership relied on implicit trust, assumed alignment, and strategic patience from allies. Trump's claim of securing the Arctic bypassed Danish sovereignty, European consensus, and multilateral norms. The coordinated exit symbolized a quiet shift. Allies no longer felt compelled to correct Trump privately. They rejected him publicly. This matters because diplomacy is cumulative. Once credibility erodes, negotiations become transactional. Commitments are hedged, and alliances quietly diversify away from dependence. Davos, in this reading, marked the moment when Europe began acting as if U.S. leadership was optional. Law, the end of the illusion of immunity. The asset seizure notice at Trump Tower carries a deeper implication. Trump's political persona thrived on the idea that enforcement could be delayed, institutions could be pressured, and consequences could be outrun. The intervention of New York authorities during a global summit punctured that myth. The timing mattered. It demonstrated that legal systems do not pause for political theater. Domestic law travels globally in perception, and financial legitimacy is inseparable from legal compliance. The video argues this was not humiliation. It was demythologization. Canada's response. Middle powers reassert themselves. Canada's alleged trade retaliation illustrates a broader shift among middle powers. Rather than absorbing U.S. pressure or responding rhetorically, Canada used legal mechanisms, targeted strategic exports, and framed its response as procedural, not emotional. This is crucial. It suggests that power is migrating from dominance to rule-based leverage. Middle powers are learning that they do not need to confront Washington directly. They can constrain behavior through systems. And retaliation can be clean, legal, and effective. Trump's style depended on asymmetry. Canada's response neutralized it. The moderator's question, a collapse of narrative authority. The deficit financing question is treated by the video as the decisive moment because it removed Trump's last defense: ambiguity. Trump excelled when questions were political, moral, or rhetorical. He struggled when forced into numerical accountability, causal explanations, and conditional futures. The silence in the room, as described, reflects a realization among elites. Trump was no longer directing events, he was reacting to them. This is the psychological shift that ends political dominance. Information speed and a death of delay. Perhaps the most consequential takeaway is technological, not political. Trump rose in an era where fact-checking lagged, narratives settled before correction, and contradictions could be reframed days later. At Davos, markets updated in seconds. Social media synchronized perception. Data invalidated claims instantly. The video calls this the collapse of narrative latency, the time gap between claim and verification. Without that gap, post-truth politics becomes unsustainable at the global level. Power after Davos, a world that moves on. The final argument is subtle but severe. Power does not disappear, it relocates. After Davos, leaders recalibrate expectations, investors price political risk differently, institutions plan contingencies. Trump may continue to command attention, but attention is not control. The world, according to this analysis, did not overthrow Trump. It simply began operating without him at the center, not a fall but a displacement. This was not the dramatic collapse of a presidency. It was something quieter and more lasting. The end of narrative dominance, the exposure of systemic dependence, and a visible separation between spectacle and authority. Davos, as portrayed by the video, represents the moment Trump's myth stopped organizing global behavior. From that point forward, the question is no longer whether Trump can speak loudly, but whether the world still listens when it matters. You've been watching Rapid Report, where global events are analyzed beyond the headlines. What this moment reveals is larger than any single leader or speech. It highlights a shifting world, one where credibility is tested instantly, where markets respond faster than messaging, and where global institutions increasingly shape outcomes in real time. Whether this Davos appearance marks a turning point or simply another chapter, one thing is clear. The balance between rhetoric and reality is becoming harder to control in a hyper-connected world. If you value fact-focused analysis, global perspective, and calm reporting in a noisy media landscape, make sure to subscribe to Rapid Report. Like this video to support independent news analysis. Share it with others who want to understand what's really happening beyond political slogans. And turn on notifications so you never miss an important update. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your trust. And we'll see you next time right here on Rapid Report.